Leaving a place is never easy, but there is nothing like the feeling of coming home. And Mr. Fidler knows a lot about coming and going, and as many of our listeners know, he became quite good at doing so at the drop of a hat. It is a wondrous thing to know how much you have changed from living in a new place, but even greater seeing how much your loved ones have transformed in your absence. For Ken, he left his growing family to seek work in a new place and would return to find his wife and daughter in a new light. Ken's return couldn't have been better planned, as his wife was very much pregnant and would give birth to their son Steve, a joyful welcome home present, just shortly after he returned home. And I guess he is just always lucky like that. A theme that has been the backbone of our podcast is impermanence and change, two undeniable truths of the human existence, and Ken showcases how to face them with humility and grace. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Ping Jockey podcast. I'm Marley, the co-host, and I'm sitting here with the Ping Jockey himself, Mr. Kenneth H Fidler. We left listeners several weeks ago with Ken's impending return home to Chester from Mexico City. And I'm just curious, Mr. Fidler, what was it like to wrap up in Mexico City with the people, the friends you had made, and the people you got to know?
Well, I had a lot of friends, and I had to get around and say goodbye to a lot of them. And I'll probably never see them again. But,
well, if you haven't yet, I guess you probably won't.
Yeah. And when I know I'd be going home in a few days, that's about all I thought about. But one of the big things was I was building a knitting machine, and they don't let you out of there unless it's running perfect without any problems.
Uh-oh.
And when I got a plane to catch, I'm a little concerned. I hope that's going to be running all right.
Well, how did that make out?
It was running fine and no problem. And I was all ready to go. And it was good that I would be leaving Mexico on the 29th because I found out that May 1st would be their Labor Day. And it could be pretty wild with shootings and so forth. So I would be leaving just in time. I had a nice surprise while I was at work the day before. Frank Romas came in to see me. He had received a telegram from the owner of the mill that he was to start Monday the 25th of April instead of May 1st. So he arrived in Mexico City the day before. I hadn't expected to see him before I left, but what a nice surprise. We went to a movie together on my last night. On Sunday, April 24th, and probably my last Sunday in Mexico before I would leave for home. I went with the Lapes, Dr. Streeter, and Mr. Chatfield up to Max's place, where we went for Sunday breakfast in the country. We wanted to go there for the last time to say goodbye. Mr. Chatfield had been planning to leave the same day that I was expected. He was going by train. Dr. Streeter would then leave on May 1st by airplane. After breakfast, Roy took us for a nice ride in the country to a couple of neighboring towns. We had a real nice trip, and the weather was hot but beautiful. I had expected to arrive in Chester that Friday night. All I had to do was pack and do a few things at work. My machine seemed to be doing fine. I just had to say goodbye to everyone.
What happened after your farewells? What was it like to travel home?
I couldn't wait to get there. And it was nice to see, as soon as I got there, to see Betty, Marybeth, Mom and Pop. It was great to be home.
How much had everyone changed?
Well, the one that changed most was Marybeth. I couldn't believe how big she was getting.
And was she talking at that point? Did you notice some developmental changes?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I'm sure Betty had changed quite a bit, too.
Yeah. And I knew it wouldn't be long before we might have somebody else in the family. And the only part of this part, I got in a little bit of trouble.
Oh. What kind of trouble did you get in?
Well, I think the second day I was there, Betty said, I think you better take me to the hospital. I think it's pretty soon. And we went in the morning and we sat there all day. And towards the evening, the doctor said, you might as well go home. It's going to be a while yet. And I said, you sure? He said, yeah. So I went home, spent the evening there, and went to bed. And about midnight, I got a phone call. And the doctor said, congratulations, you have a little boy. And I said, is everybody all right? He said, yeah, they're fine. I said, thank you, and I hung up and went back to bed. And Betty reminded me about that quite often.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my gosh, I can't believe you didn't get in the... Why, thank you. Everyone's all right. I'll go back to bed now. Oh, my gosh.
Well, what else was I supposed to do?
Get in the car and head over to the hospital? I don't know.
I'm not too experienced at that.
I guess.
When Marybeth was born, I was out in the ocean.
Yeah, you weren't there, so you didn't have practice. Okay, I'll give you that. So everything went well with the birth, but I know that there was a little bit of a scare at first because of your blood types. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. Betty had a list of things that we needed to do before the baby came. On the top of the list was her appointment with Dr. Nimitz to talk about our RH factor. Betty had type A blood with an RH negative, and I had type A blood with an RH positive. When Marybeth was born, we were told that this is the worst combination of blood you can have, and that sometimes you have what they call a blue baby. And if that happened, they would have to give the baby a blood transfusion. When Marybeth was born, my mom said, Betty's mom said, she was really dark, but they didn't give her a transfusion and everything turned out all right. Betty said that they were making arrangements for this baby to have an ambulance and a crew standing by in the county so that if there was a problem after the birth, they could rush the baby to St. Christopher Hospital in Philadelphia for a transfusion.
Wow, that's kind of scary
Yeah.
to deal with that. So just to circle back a little bit, I know Betty wasn't too happy that you didn't come join her the evening that Steve was born, but you did go to the hospital the next morning. What was that like?
Everything was fine, but I think I'm not sure if I went to see her first or if I went to look for the baby. I think I might have looked for the baby first.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And then I went to see how she was doing, and they were both doing fine.
Okay.
Where the babies were so I could see our new son, I found him, and I was sure that he was the most beautiful baby there. Thank heavens there wasn't any problems with the RH factor, so nothing special had to be done. Both Betty and Steve were doing fine. When I arrived home from Mexico, I had some time to report for work in Reading right away. I took some time to just stay home and get used to being with Betty. Marybeth and Kenneth H Fidler, our new son. I don't remember just when we moved back to our house in Reading and when I started working again, but I do know that Stephen was christened in June at St. Matthew's Lutheran Church in Reading, Pennsylvania. Betty's parents, Francis and Elizabeth McBride, were his sponsors.
Wow. So, at this point, no more surprises. You weren't going to be called up to serve the country yet again. You were going to be home for good. And you and Betty didn't end up staying in Reading too long. You actually moved to Lancaster, correct? What helped with that shift?
For quite a while. As soon as we moved back to Reading, I went back to work, and they didn't have any more jobs out on the road, so I got a job in the shop, and I wasn't too crazy about it, but I kept working there as an inspector in one machine shop. I was unhappy and I asked for a raise, and they said, "You're already getting more than anybody else there." And he said, "Well," I said, "the other fellow was there a long term before me." And he said, "Yeah, I know, but you're getting a nickel more than him." But he said, "I'll give you a little raise." He said, "You could be getting $2 an hour." That gave me a penny raise, and I was very unhappy. So then I went to see the boss I had when I was building knitting machines, and I told them if they didn't have a job for me, I was going to go looking. I found that they were looking for erectors at the Berkshire knitting mills. They were taking old machines and rebuilding them. Other countries were buying knitting machines, so when they were trying to buy these other countries, they'd use the machines as part of the money, but they had to be running good. So I got a job over there building knitting machines at the Berkshire knitting mills.
And how did that go?
I liked that, but after I was there a while, I could see the reading on the wall that they're going to be laying them off pretty soon. And then I heard that Shake and Lancaster were booming, and they were looking for help.
Mm.
And I went over and checked, and they signed me up. But it turned out, they said you had to get a physical first. And I found out I had a hernia, and they said you got to have the operation first. So
Wow.
So I had that, and then after that, I started working at Schick. And for a while, I was in a carpool. There were three of us, all from Reading, working at Schick, and we drove back and forth together.
Wow.
And I did that for, probably close to a year. Then all of a sudden, a certain job got hot, the one I was working on, and they wanted me to work evening shift and 12 hours. And that meant I couldn't go with the carpool. And I was going in at 7 at night and working till 7 in the morning.
Wow.
And this was in December. And a couple times it started snowing a little bit. And then I located an apartment nearby that if anybody needs a place to sleep overnight, you could sleep there. And I talked to them, and they said, hey, anytime it snows and you have a problem, you can sleep here.
Wow.
And I did that for a little while, but I thought, this might be a good idea to think about maybe moving over here. And soon after that, we moved over. And that was 1960.
So that's how you wound up in Lancaster.
Yep, that did it.
In our next episode, I guess we're going to dive into a little bit more about what it was like to make the transition from Reading to Lancaster and about what it was like to raise a family in the 1960s. So this is Marley and Ken Fidler. We're signing off.
Bye-bye.